Taoiseach, I want to raise with you this morning a very, very serious issue that, on reflection, could represent a serious scandal and unacceptable response by the state in relation to exposure to dangerous chemicals at the aircraft maintenance shops at Baldonnel in the Air Corps over many, many years. Now, 3 whistleblowers, Taoiseach, warned you and in particular Minister Simon Coveney in November of 2015 about the conditions at the Air Corps maintenance shops in Baldonnel and the degree to which staff there were exposed to very dangerous solvents and chemicals. The linkage of the particular chemicals to cancer-causing diseases, genetic mutation, neurological conditions and chronic diseases have been well established, and there is a precedent in Australia in 2000 and the early 2000s where this was identified and acted upon by the Australian government. Now, going back to 2012, complaints would have been made to the Department of Defence, to the Air Corps, to the Army, in relation to this. And it was revealed, and Minister Coveney would have been informed in November 2015, that workers were not receiving occupational health monitoring as required by law, as required by the 2005 Health and Safety Act, and extraordinarily were not being provided with protective equipment and clothing as they worked with very dangerous chemicals indeed. PD Fora would have written to the Air Corps in 2015, warning that any health inspection of Baldonnel would produce damning findings. It took until 2016 for the Health and Safety Authority to actually threaten the Air Corps with prosecution unless it implemented a number of recommendations, including the provision of appropriate equipment to handling chemicals and the surveillance of staff health to monitor any adverse effects they experienced as a result of their duties. Isn't it extraordinary that in 2016 the Health and Safety Authority is writing to our own Air Corps to say very basic provisions of our law should be implemented? The whistleblowers have not received any formal acknowledgement from the Minister and from Minister Coveney over that 12 months. And the State's response has been standard and deeply depressing. It's resorted to the courts. There are 6 cases in the courts right now, and the government are fighting them very strongly and acknowledging no negligence or anything. What did the Australian government do? Well, in 2000 they appointed a board of inquiry, and arising out of that they commissioned a health study to study the health outcomes of aircraft maintenance personnel working in the F-11 bomber programme. And that came up with fairly damning outcomes. I put it to you, Taoiseach, and I ask you, why was the state so slow in responding to the whistleblowers and in investigating the health conditions at Baldonnel? And why were the whistleblowers not acknowledged by the Minister? Will the government commission an independent health outcome study in aircraft maintenance personnel similar to that carried out by the Australian government of personnel working at those particular aircraft maintenance shops in Baldonnel? And will you commission a similar board of inquiry, independent, into this entire affair and scandal, Taoiseach? I'd appreciate it if you could.
Taoiseach, please.
Thanks, Deputy Martin. A number of protected disclosures have been made in relation to the Air Corps. There was an independent third party appointed to review the allegations, and those making the disclosures were informed of this, and since then there has been a line of communication with the individuals who have been involved here. When the disclosures were received, legal advice was sought and an independent reviewer was appointed. Subsequently, the person appointed could not act and an alternative independent third party was appointed. In November, interim recommendations and observations were submitted to the Minister, and they were passed to the military authorities for immediate action and response. As you know, I have delegated by statutory instrument responsibility for defence to Minister Keogh here. On the 7th of January this year, a response was received from the military authorities outlining the actions that are underway, and this was forwarded to the independent reviewer who was appointed for his consideration. The reviewer will now consider this material, undertake what further steps he deems appropriate in order to finalise the review in the context of it being as serious as you point out. Once a final review is to hand, let me assure you that the Minister will see to it that all recommendations to ensure the safety of the members of the Defence Forces are acted upon properly. As the independent process is going on and these issues are the subject of litigation, I probably shouldn't say any more. I would say, however, from my experience of dealing with the Defence Forces in right across the entire range of the Defence Forces, that they have, in my experience, always operated to the very highest standards. Now, the issues that you have raised here are very different, and they deserve and need to be dealt with. So I do hope that the response received from the military authorities, which is now in the hands of the independently appointed person, will be examined properly, and the recommendations that are going to be made by the independent reviewer will be implemented as they should be. Everybody wants to see that particularly those who give so much of their lives to the Defence Forces, that they should have proper equipment, the very best facilities, that they would be safeguarded, and particularly in matters in relation to health and safety, that these would be of the very highest standards. What you've been referring to, obviously, is different. There have been 3 inspections carried out by the Health and Safety Authority at the Air Corps in Baldonnel, focusing in particular on the control of occupational hygiene hazards in the workplace, including health surveillance issues. And the HSA issued its report of inspection to the Air Corps on the 21st of October last year. And it listed a number of matters at Cancorla requiring attention, which included the areas of risk assessment, health surveillance, monitoring of employees' actual exposure to particular hazardous substances, and the provision and the use of personal protective equipment. I'll follow another piece of information.
Deputy Martin.
Very dissatisfied with that response. You haven't explained what happened from 2015 when the protective disclosure was made and why Minister Coveney didn't acknowledge and didn't respond to the whistleblowers. There's a sense that this has been buried, Taoiseach, and the Health and Safety Authority report is October 2016, and it is saying that staff also need to be given equipment to protect themselves from chemical exposure. Adequate and appropriately specified personal protective equipment, in particular protective gloves, eye protection, respirators for protection against chemical exposure, must be readily available to employees as required by relevant risk assessment findings. Implication being that this was not the case up to now, which I think is quite extraordinary. And I agree with you in terms of the degree to which we hold our defence forces in high esteem. But the catalogue here of lack of enforcement, lack of protection, of health surveillance and so on is quite extraordinary. Now, I asked you, Taoiseach, and I put it to you that the government's response is to bury this. There's litigation. Will you ensure that the Health and Safety Authority report is published? Will you publish all internal reports in the department pertaining to this? And in addition, Taoiseach, will you ensure that there is a full public disclosure in relation to all of this? Because we're not talking about just now. We're talking about what went on for the last 20 to 25
Thank you, Deputy.
years.
Time is up.
And the Australian government was markedly different in its approach to the Irish government, which is to deny, 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 resist, 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 and more or less say to the whistleblowers, we don't accept anything you're saying, and we have no time for the manner in which we've gone about this, because that's how they feel right now, Taoiseach, and I've spoken to them.
Taoiseach.
There is litigation going on, and I don't comment on that. But these issues that have been raised need to be dealt with and will be dealt with. The first person to be appointed, actually it's quite difficult to get somebody with the range of competence to deal with all the implications of hazardous substances and that sort of area. So the second person as appointed has received the material. The HSA issued its report of inspection to the Air Corps on the 21st of October last year, and they listed a number of matters there. I'm advised that the military authorities responded in writing to that HSA report on the 20th of December last year, indicating that the Irish Air Corps is fully committed to implementing the improved safety measures that protect workers from potential exposures to chemicals, and that they will ensure that risks are as low as is reasonably practicable. The Air Corps has implemented an improvement plan which has been conducted over 8 particular phases. The first phase commenced last September 2016, with phase completion dates to December of this year 2017. I'm advised that 7 out of the 8 phases are due to be implemented by May of 2017. There are a number of disclosures which were made to the Minister for Defence, as you say, under the Protected Act of 2014. They were received in December 2015 and December 2016. I'll update the House on following through on this. Well, obviously, a person was appointed early on who wasn't able to take up the duty. There are a number of other issues that are the subject of litigation at the moment. But I'll update the House on it because we will sort this out.